My name is Frances Danner, though most people call me Fran. I am 64 years old, a retired teacher who spent most of her life in Vermont, surrounded by quiet hills and the scent of pine. I never thought I'd be telling my story this way, after burying my only son. But sometimes silence carries the loudest truths, and mine began on the coldest morning of my life, the day of Michael's funeral. If you've ever lost someone and felt there was more beneath the grief, stay with me. What I found later changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the kind of justice that doesn't shout. The church smelled like lilies, too many of them, their sweetness heavy enough to sting the back of my throat. The pews were filled with faces that didn't look at me directly, and the front row, where a mother should sit, was already taken by my daughter-in-law, Elise, and her parents, Preston and Marjorie Hale. Their posture was impeccable, the kind of polished grief money buys. I stood near the aisle, holding a handkerchief that didn't quite know what to do with my hands. Michael's photo rested beside the coffin. He was smiling, alive in that still frame, the same smile he wore when he first bought Silver Brook, the old family farm he swore would become his life's work. I used to spend summers there with him, before things changed, before he told me I wasn't welcome anymore. I tried not to remember the last argument, the one about his heart condition, about Elise's family's investment, about how he said, "Mom, you wouldn't understand." And now, here I was, surrounded by people who looked at me like a distant relative, someone who didn't belong. When the pastor spoke, his words slid past me. I watched Preston whisper something to Marjorie. Their eyes shifted toward me, then away again. Elise's face was pale, too calm for a widow. Beside her, my granddaughter Lily sat still, her dark hair hiding her eyes. She didn't cry. That worried me more than anything. After the service, I waited outside under a maple tree stripped bare by winter. Snow gathered on the path leading to the cemetery. I saw Preston speaking to a man in a dark coat near the hearse. I moved closer, my steps slow, careful on the ice. His voice was low but clear enough. "Silver Brook will be ours soon," he said. The words hit me like a shove. Ours. The word didn't belong to him. That land had been Michael's dream, my husband's before him. I turned away before anyone saw my face. Later, at the reception, no one asked me to sit. I stood near the window, watching snowflakes fall on the churchyard. Elise approached once, her hands folded, her eyes tired. "Fran, maybe it's best you rest now," she said softly. Her tone carried politeness like a blade wrapped in silk. "I'm fine," I replied. "Just wanted to say goodbye properly." She nodded, but her gaze slid to her father again. I followed it, and for a moment, Preston smiled at me, the kind of smile that hides teeth. When the hall began to empty, Lily came to me. She was only 15, but her eyes carried something ancient. "Grandma," she whispered, "they won't let me go to the farm. Mom said it's not safe." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not safe? Who told her that?" "She said Dad told her before he—" Her voice cracked. "Before he died." Something cold settled in my stomach. Michael had forbidden me from Silver Brook too, months before his death. Said it was complicated. Now it was sealed off from both of us. That night, I went home alone. My small house felt too quiet, too clean. On the table lay the funeral program and the photo of Michael smiling in front of the barn. I stared at it until the room blurred. My son had always been a builder, not a man who ran from problems. But lately, before he passed, he'd sounded different on the phone. Nervous, distracted. He'd once said, "Mom, if anything happens, just trust me and stay away from the farm." I'd laughed it off then. Now it echoed like a warning. A week passed. I tried to move on, to do what grieving mothers are supposed to do: cook soup, fold laundry, talk to the walls. Then, one cold afternoon, a man in a gray coat knocked on my door. His name was Thomas Reed, Michael's lawyer. I remembered him vaguely from years ago. His expression was solemn but not cold. "Mrs. Danner," he said, holding a folder. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are some matters from Michael's estate that require your acknowledgement." I led him inside. He sat at the kitchen table, opened the folder, and read from a document with that measured tone lawyers use when they don't want to sound human. "According to your son's will, all assets are to be transferred to his wife, Elise Danner, including Silverbrook Ranch." I felt my breath hitch, but I said nothing. He paused, perhaps waiting for me to break. I didn't. When he finished, he closed the folder. Then he reached into his coat and took out a smaller envelope, aged and sealed with wax. "He also left this," Thomas said. "For you, handwritten. He instructed that it be delivered 1 week after his passing." I looked at it, heavy in my palm. My name was written in Michael's handwriting, steady, deliberate. There was also a small silver key taped to the back. "Did he say what it was for?" I asked. Thomas shook his head. "Only that you should go alone." After he left, I sat at the table for a long time. The envelope lay between my hands like a living thing. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old window latch. I didn't open the letter yet. I wanted to, but something in me needed to wait. I thought of Preston's whisper at the funeral, of the way Elise avoided my eyes, of the farm locked behind those iron gates. And I thought of my son, the man who had once built a greenhouse just to surprise me on Mother's Day, now leaving me a key and a warning. When the clock struck midnight, I placed the letter beside Michael's photo. "Whatever you meant by this," I whispered, "I'll find it." The house was silent, except for the faint creak of the floorboards, the sound of snow brushing against the window pane, and somewhere far away, a door seemed to close. I didn't know then that the letter and the key would unravel everything I believed about family, loyalty, and truth. All I knew was that my son had left me nothing in his will, but something in that envelope was waiting, and I had to find out what it was. I didn't open the letter that night. I couldn't. It sat on my bedside table like a heartbeat I wasn't ready to hear. The silver key glinted in the dark, catching the moonlight through the thin curtain. I turned on my side, pulled the blanket to my chin, and told myself I'd deal with it tomorrow. But sleep never came. Grief has a way of making silence feel like company, and that night, silence talked louder than anything else. The next morning, I brewed coffee strong enough to wake ghosts. My hands trembled as I finally broke the seal. The handwriting was unmistakable. Michael's, neat but pressed too hard into the paper, like he'd been writing through fear. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to tell you everything. I had my reasons for keeping you away from Silverbrook, and I need you to trust that it wasn't anger. I was protecting something. Go to the farm. Alone. Use the key. You'll understand. That was all. No love you. No goodbye. Just instructions that felt like a riddle." The coffee went cold before I remembered to drink it. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it back into its envelope, and slipped the key into my pocket. By noon, Thomas called. His voice was polite, almost distant, but I could hear the weight behind it. "Mrs. Danner, I need you to come by the office. There are additional estate documents you should sign. It won't take long." When I arrived, the Hale family was already there. Preston stood near the window, hands behind his back like he owned the place. Marjorie sat perfectly still, legs crossed, her perfume thick enough to fill the room. Elise was there too, pale and quiet, eyes fixed on the table. Thomas nodded to me. "We'll begin." Victor Lang, the Hale's lawyer, spoke first. He had the kind of voice that sounded trained to win arguments before they began. Per Mr. Danner's last testament, the entire estate, including Silverbrook, the company shares, and all holdings, have been lawfully transferred to Mrs. Elise Danner. His words landed like stones. I stared at the document on the table, Michael's signature printed neatly at the bottom. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misread the letter at home. Maybe the key was symbolic, his way of saying goodbye. But the words in that letter felt too urgent, too alive to be mere sentiment. Thomas cleared his throat. "There's no clause for his mother?" Victor smiled without warmth. "No, sir. None. Not even a token bequest." Preston looked at me then, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. Michael was a practical man. He wanted stability for his family. "I'm sure you understand, Fran." I wanted to speak, but something in me told me to stay quiet. My silence seemed to amuse him. Elise's hands fidgeted with her ring. She didn't meet my eyes. For a moment, I saw her lips part as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Thomas slid a few pages toward me. "You don't have to sign anything you're not comfortable with," he said softly. Victor interjected. "It's merely acknowledgement of notification, not consent. Standard procedure." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I signed where Thomas pointed, my name trembling slightly across the page. As I stood to leave, Marjorie's voice followed me, sweet and sharp. "It must be a relief, Fran. Less responsibility now." I turned toward her. "Responsibility never leaves a mother," I said quietly. "It just changes shape." Her smile faltered. Outside, the sky hung low, the color of old ash. Snow drifted across the parking lot, landing softly on the hood of my car. I sat inside for a long moment, the heater humming, the letter burning a hole in my coat pocket. When I finally drove home, the world felt hollow. I parked, walked up the porch steps, and stopped when I saw the corner of something sticking out beneath my door. Another envelope, smaller than the first. No return address. Inside was a single note written in block letters. "Go to Silverbrook. Don't tell anyone. Watch the lights." No signature. Just the faint scent of machine oil on the paper, like it had been handled by someone who worked with tools. My heart pounded. The timing was too strange to ignore. Michael's letter, the will, and now this anonymous message. That night, I couldn't sit still. I cleaned the same counter 3 times. I watched the clock crawl toward midnight. When the hands met, I put on my coat and stepped outside. The air was sharp, the stars distant and cold. I held the key in my palm. It was heavier than it looked, smooth from years of use. I closed my fingers around it and whispered, "All right, Michael, I'm coming." The next morning, Thomas called again. "Mrs. Danner, I've been thinking about the terms of that will," he said. "It's strange. There's no mention of the escrow account tied to Silverbrook, and the notary date is off by 2 days. Could be nothing, but..." He trailed off, waiting. "But it could be something," I finished. "Exactly. Let me know before you visit the property." I didn't tell him I was already planning to. Some part of me needed to see it with my own eyes before sharing anything with anyone. I spent the rest of the day packing small things, a flashlight, my old phone, a thermos of coffee, the letter, and the key. Before leaving, I looked at Michael's photo again. His smile felt different now, like he knew I'd be doing exactly this. Lily called just as I locked the door. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, her voice small. "I'm all right, honey. Just running an errand." Mom says Grandpa Preston wants to visit Silverbrook soon. I froze. Did she say why? She said it's business stuff, but Grandma, I don't think she wants to go. She looks scared. I swallowed hard. Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. I'll talk to her soon. After we hung up, I stood on the porch and breathed in the cold. The world felt suspended, as if holding its breath. I reached into my pocket and touched the key again. I didn't know what I would find at Silverbrook. All I knew was that Michael had wanted me to go there alone, and that the truth had been buried along with him. I stepped down the icy path toward my car, the letter tucked safely against my chest. As I turned the ignition, a faint light blinked on my phone, an unread message from an unknown number. It said only 2 words: "Be careful." The morning I drove to Silverbrook, the sun barely rose. It lingered behind a curtain of fog, as if uncertain whether it wanted to witness what was about to unfold. The road out of town was narrow and lined with birch trees that bent inward, their branches like reaching hands. I hadn't been to the farm in nearly 3 years. Michael had stopped inviting me long before that, saying the place was too busy, too full of projects. But I remembered the smell of hay and rain, the sound of the creek that ran behind the barn. Those memories clung to me like a promise. I packed light, just a thermos of coffee, gloves, and the letter tucked safely in my coat pocket. The silver key lay on the passenger seat, catching glints of light as I drove. Every few miles, the wind picked up and rattled through the trees, a low, hollow sound that made me think of whispers. As the town disappeared behind me, the road turned rough, the asphalt breaking into gravel. I slowed down. The farm sat deep in the valley, past the old mill road and the bridge that had lost its guardrails long ago. I could almost hear Michael's voice, teasing me for driving too slowly. He used to say, "Mom, this road only looks lonely. It's been listening to us for generations." Halfway there, I noticed headlights in the rearview mirror. A black SUV, maybe 50 yards back, steady and deliberate. I thought little of it at first. These back roads often drew hunters or delivery trucks. But as I turned off onto the narrow dirt path leading to Silverbrook, the SUV turned too. My heart began to drum. The path wound through a stretch of pine forest, the kind that blocks the sky. My tires kicked up dust, and each bump sent a tremor through my hands. I slowed, hoping they'd pass. The SUV didn't. It kept its distance, neither closing in nor fading away. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe paranoia came free with grief. But then I saw something, a glint of metal, a reflection from the driver's side mirror that flickered when I slowed down. Whoever they were, they wanted me to know they were there. I pressed harder on the gas until the trees broke open into a field I knew by heart. The old windmill stood crooked against the horizon, its blades frozen mid-turn. And there it was, Silverbrook. The farmhouse, 2 stories of weathered wood and blue shutters, sat on the hill like a memory left behind. The barn stood to the right, its doors chained. The place looked abandoned but not dead. The grass had been cut recently, and faint smoke marks trailed from the old fire pit. Someone had been here. I parked near the gate and stepped out. The air smelled like rain on metal. My boots crunched over frost. The key felt warm in my palm, almost alive. I slid it into the lock. It turned easily with a soft click. the sound echoing through the quiet field. The gate creaked open. I turned to look behind me, but the road was empty now. No SUV, just fog. My pulse slowed, but unease lingered like a weight in my chest. The farmhouse windows were dark. I climbed the steps, the wood groaning under my feet. The door opened with a sigh, and for a moment, I stood still, breathing in the scent of cedar and dust. Everything looked untouched. Michael's jacket still hanging by the door, a cup on the table, a book left open beside it. I whispered, "You left in a hurry, didn't you?" Inside, the air was thick and cold. I brushed my fingers over the kitchen counter, the grain of the wood smooth under a thin layer of dust. On the fridge was a photo I hadn't seen in years. Michael at 8, grinning beside his father, Henry, holding a fishing pole twice his size. I smiled despite the ache in my chest. I walked through the rooms slowly, half expecting to find him sitting at his desk, his laptop glowing in the corner. Every creak of the floor sounded like footsteps behind me. I opened the door to his study. The curtains were drawn, but a faint light flickered on the desk. The laptop. Its screen glowed faint blue. A single line of text displayed. "Hello, Mom." My breath caught. My first thought was that it was an old message, some forgotten auto-run, but the timestamp in the corner said otherwise. It was recent. Days recent. I hesitated, my hand trembling above the mouse. Then I clicked. A video began to play. The screen brightened, and there he was. Michael, pale, thinner than I remembered, but alive on the screen. His voice filled the room, quiet and measured. "If you're watching this, Mom, it means things didn't go as planned." I sank into the nearest chair, my knees weak. He continued, "I know you were hurt when I kept you away from Silver Brook. I had to. I needed to protect what we found here. And if the wrong people knew—" He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "You'll understand soon. Look where it all began. The house remembers." The video flickered and froze for a moment, then resumed. His voice softened. "You'll find the truth here, but you can't do it alone. Be careful who you trust." Then the screen went black. I sat in silence, the hum of the laptop the only sound. I whispered his name. Nothing answered but the wind pressing against the windows. Outside, the fog thickened. I closed the laptop and stood. Somewhere far off, an engine started. My skin prickled. I moved to the window, peering through the curtain. The faint shape of a vehicle lingered near the edge of the property before vanishing behind the trees. I locked the door and pressed my back against it. Whatever Michael had wanted me to find, it was buried deep here, and someone didn't want me finding it. The silver key hung heavy in my pocket. I reached up and touched the frame of his photo on the wall. His smile looked different now, almost like he knew I'd come. I took a deep breath and whispered, "All right, son, I'm here. Show me what you meant." The house creaked again, as if in answer. Somewhere upstairs, a window shutter banged softly in the wind. I turned toward the stairs, heart pounding, ready to see what else this place remembered. The staircase groaned beneath my steps as I climbed, each creak echoing through the stillness. I had walked these same stairs decades ago, when Michael was a boy who hid marbles in the banister and tried to feed the barn cats through his window. But now the air felt heavier, colder, like the house was holding its breath. I reached the landing and paused, looking down the hallway lined with faded photographs. There was one of Michael at 8, his hair messy, his arms stained with paint. Another of Henry, my late husband, standing in front of the barn. I touched the edge of the frame, and dust clung to my fingertips. A faint hum drew me toward Michael's old study. The laptop still glowed faintly downstairs, a reminder that something inside these walls wasn't ready to rest. I opened the first door on the left. His library. Shelves climbed to the ceiling, stacked with engineering manuals, soil maps, even theology books. The smell of paper and time filled the air. On the desk, a thin layer of dust had been disturbed recently. A circle marked where something heavy had been sitting. Next to it, a glass of water, half evaporated. I whispered, "You were here recently, weren't you?" My voice felt strange in the quiet. The window curtains moved slightly, though the air was still. I followed the draft to a corner vent near the floor, half hidden by a stack of folders. It rattled once, then stopped. When I crouched down, I saw that the screws had been loosened. Inside, there was a flash drive wrapped in plastic. Red casing, clean, untouched by dust. My pulse quickened. I slipped it into my pocket and kept moving. Across the hall was Michael's old bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it gently and stepped inside. The bed was neatly made, the comforter gray and tucked tight, just like he used to do when he stayed late in college dorms. On the dresser sat a framed photo of Lily as a toddler, wearing rain boots 2 sizes too big. Next to it, a sticky note in Michael's handwriting. For later. I didn't know if the note was meant for me or for himself. The wind pressed against the window pane, and somewhere in the distance a hinge creaked. I looked outside. The fog was thinning now, revealing the distant outline of the barn. The doors looked newer, recently painted. Someone had replaced the old hinges. Downstairs, a faint chime echoed, 3 short tones. My head snapped toward the sound. I followed it to the study where the laptop screen flickered back to life. The video started again without me touching anything. Michael's face filled the screen. He looked tired, paler than before. "Mom, if you made it this far, then good. You're inside the house. Everything I needed you to know is here. Check the workshop under the stairs. I left something for you there. And if you hear the generator, don't turn it off. It keeps the cameras running." He paused, his eyes searching the lens. "Trust Elliot. He'll come when it's time." The image glitched. A faint pop in the audio, then cut to black. The workshop under the stairs. I turned immediately, the key cold in my hand. The space beneath the staircase had always been Henry's domain, filled with tools and wood shavings. I opened the narrow door and crouched to look inside. Dust drifted through the air like smoke. There were boxes stacked high, a coil of extension cords, and the faint smell of oil. Then I saw it. A small locked cabinet near the back, its handle rusted but intact. The silver key fit perfectly. When I turned it, the lock clicked open, the sound sharp in the silence. Inside, there was a single leather-bound notebook and a small hard drive labeled SB Project. I opened the notebook. The first page was dated 6 months before Michael's death. His handwriting was hurried but legible. If they find this, they'll think I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But I know what they're doing. Preston's people have been buying land across the valley, testing wells, drilling quietly. Toxic runoff, unreported. Silverbrook sits on the same line. If the reports go public, they lose everything. I flipped through the pages, maps, coordinates, notes about escrow files and timestamps, something about lab tests. Each entry ended with a single phrase: "Keep Mom safe." I pressed the notebook against my chest, my throat tight. The generator Michael mentioned began to hum somewhere outside. A steady vibration ran through the floorboards. I followed the sound to the kitchen. where a small monitor blinked on. The display showed 4 camera feeds, one from the gate, one from the barn, one from the house exterior, and one from inside the living room. The feeds were grainy, but live. On the barn camera, a shape moved, tall, dark, stepping briefly into the frame before the feed cut to static. I froze. The sound of gravel crunched outside. Someone was out there. I turned off the screen and killed the lights, standing perfectly still in the dark. For several minutes, nothing. Just the low hum of the generator, steady and unbroken. Then the crunching stopped. A door slammed somewhere beyond the house, and the night swallowed the sound. I sat down on the edge of the couch, holding the notebook close. My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was anger. Michael had been trying to expose something, and someone had made sure he couldn't. The letter, the key, the video, it was all leading me here, to the truth that waited in these walls. When the hum finally faded, I walked to the window. The fog had lifted completely, revealing the pale outline of the barn bathed in moonlight. I whispered, "Tomorrow." Behind me, the screen of the laptop flickered once more. A single new message appeared. "Go to the barn, Mom. It's time." I stared at the words until they blurred, then looked back at the farm that had once been my family's pride. The house wasn't just remembering him. It was guiding me, one heartbeat at a time. I didn't sleep that night. The house creaked and sighed like it was breathing around me, the old wooden beams settling under the cold. Every sound made me turn my head. The wind through the vents, a soft ticking from the pipes, the hum of the generator outside. I sat in the armchair near the window, clutching Michael's notebook to my chest, the words inside it circling in my head like restless birds. Toxic runoff, land drilling, lab results. Keep Mom safe. By dawn, the fog had begun to dissolve into threads of gold. I poured myself black coffee from the old percolator Michael kept on the counter. It tasted burnt and bitter, but I didn't care. The notebook lay open beside me, the pages covered in sketches of wells, pipes, and soil markers. On one of them, a single name was underlined 3 times. Dr. Nancy Cordell. I recognized it from the hospital reports I'd once signed for Michael's treatment. She'd been his cardiologist, the one who warned him about stress and overwork. But now, her name was listed under something else, toxicology, pending confirmation. I read that line again and again until my hands began to shake. I turned toward the laptop. It still sat on the desk where I'd left it, the black screen reflecting my own worried face. I touched the trackpad, and it came to life instantly. A folder blinked open on its own, titled "For Mom." Inside were several video files, each dated weeks apart. The first one was labeled simply November. I clicked it. Michael appeared again, sitting in the same study where I was now. His eyes looked darker, ringed with fatigue, but his voice was calm. "Mom, I need you to understand this before it's too late. My heart condition isn't the whole story." He reached for a glass of water on his desk, his hand trembling. "Dr. Cordell thinks something's off. My blood work showed abnormal traces, levels that shouldn't exist in a cardiac patient. She ordered a full tox screen, but I never got the results. The file disappeared from the hospital system 2 days later." He took a long breath, glancing toward the window. "I've been followed. I know it sounds paranoid, but I can feel it. Preston's people want Silverbrook. They're drilling under the East Ridge. It's not about agriculture. It's about what's underneath. Oil, Mom. Enough to change everything. And I found proof." The image flickered, and his voice cut for a moment before returning, softer now. "I told Elise part of it. She got scared. I don't blame her. But if anything happens to me, you'll find the rest in the barn. Elliot knows how to help. He hesitated, eyes glistening. And Mom, I'm sorry for pushing you away. I didn't want you caught in this. I thought keeping you out would keep you safe. The video froze, the image breaking into tiny squares of light. For a second, the room went silent, except for the sound of my own breath. Then the screen glitched again, and a distorted voice, his voice, whispered through static. Someone wants me gone sooner. My heart stopped. The file ended abruptly, the screen fading to black. I stared at the laptop, the words echoing in my mind until they no longer felt like sound, but like cold truth crawling under my skin. Poison, missing files, a son who knew too much. I stood slowly and looked around the room. The air seemed heavier now, the dust thicker. A faint smell lingered, something metallic and bitter. I walked toward the kitchen sink, ran the faucet, and watched the water flow clear. My reflection shimmered faintly in the surface, and for a moment, I thought I saw another shadow behind me, tall, blurred by the morning light. I turned quickly. Nothing. I returned to the desk, opened the drawer beneath the laptop, and found a small black notebook. Inside was a list of dates, followed by words written in short, tight strokes. Lab A, Lab B, Lab C. Beneath it, 3 results identical, confirmed toxicity, file to escrow. I didn't fully understand the science, but the implication was clear enough. Michael had been poisoned, and he knew who was responsible. I pressed my palm against the notebook, feeling the weight of it. My son had died alone, surrounded by evidence he couldn't trust anyone else to hold. He had left it all for me, believing I could finish what he started. The sound of the generator outside broke my thoughts. It sputtered once, then went silent. The hum that had filled the house since last night was suddenly gone. I froze. Without it, the silence felt too deep, too sudden. I reached for the flashlight and stepped toward the back door. The cold hit me immediately, sharp, against my face. Frost glistened on the grass, and the trees swayed in the early light. I moved slowly toward the generator, my boots crunching on the gravel. The switch had been turned off. Not broken. Turned. Someone had been here. I spun around, scanning the yard. The barn loomed in the distance, the sunlight catching the lock on its door. I thought I saw movement near the trees. But when I blinked, it was gone. I went back inside, locking the door behind me. My pulse refused to slow. On the kitchen table, the laptop screen lit up again on its own. A new message appeared, only 1 line long. He knew. I stood frozen, the message burning in front of me. Who wrote this? I whispered, my voice breaking. No answer came. The wind pushed against the windows, making the curtains sway. For a moment, I could almost hear Michael's voice in it, low and calm, the way he used to sound when he wanted to comfort me. You'll understand soon. I sat down, clutching both notebooks to my chest, and looked at the silver key still on the table. I had thought it was only for the gate, but now I wasn't sure. Maybe it was for something deeper, something buried where the truth waited. I lifted my eyes to the ceiling, to the beams that had held this house together longer than I'd been alive, and whispered, "All right, Michael, I'm listening." The wind outside quieted. The laptop screen dimmed. In the distance, the barn door creaked open just slightly, as if the farm itself had heard me. The following morning arrived shrouded in a light mist, the kind that makes the world feel suspended between waking and dreaming. I hadn't planned to stay another night at the farm. but something in my chest refused to let me leave. I needed answers, and now I knew where to look. The barn. Still, I wanted daylight before stepping back into that part of Michael's world. So I made breakfast I barely touched and sat at the table listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Every so often, I'd glance at the laptop. It stayed dark, as if even it needed rest after what it had revealed. A knock came at the front door. My heart jumped. I hesitated before opening it, but when I did, a rush of relief filled me. Lily stood there, her dark hair pulled into a messy braid, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked older than 15, her eyes too knowing for her age. "Grandma?" she said, breathless. "I had to come. Mom doesn't know I'm here." I pulled her into my arms. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't have come alone." I couldn't stay there. Grandpa Preston's been in the house every day since the funeral. Mom looks scared all the time. I found something in Dad's old drawer, a photo of this place with a circle drawn around the barn. She opened her backpack and showed me the picture. Sure enough, Michael's handwriting marked the barn with the word truth. I took her hand and led her inside. The air smelled faintly of dust and wood smoke. She looked around, her eyes darting to the framed pictures and the open laptop on the desk. "Grandma," she whispered, "this house feels like him." I nodded, my throat tight. "It remembers him." We sat together on the couch, and I told her about the letter, the videos, and the strange messages that had appeared on the screen. Her face stayed calm, but her fingers twisted the edge of her sleeve. "I think they're watching," she said quietly. "The night after the funeral, I saw a man standing across the street from our house. He wasn't moving, just standing there. When I went to get Mom, he was gone. But then, the next morning, a black SUV drove by, real slow." The words made my stomach clench. "Did you tell your mother?" She said I imagined it, but I know what I saw. Outside, the mist thickened again, swirling across the fields like smoke. I closed the curtains, the air in the room suddenly colder. The cameras on the monitor were off since the generator had stopped working, but I had no desire to check if they still recorded. "Sweetheart," I said, "we'll stay together today. No wandering off. And if anything happens, anything, you go to Thomas Reed. He's safe." She nodded, her hand finding mine. Her skin felt cold, but her grip was strong. "I want to help, Grandma. Dad wouldn't want you doing this alone." Her words broke something in me. For months, I had carried this silence like a burden only I could bear. But now, seeing her courage, I realized Michael had left me more than a mystery. He had left me an ally. By afternoon, the fog lifted enough for us to see the far edge of the property. The barn stood silent, its roof gleaming faintly with melted frost. We decided to walk there before sunset. As we stepped outside, I noticed new tire tracks pressed into the soft dirt near the gate. "Grandma," Lily said, pointing, "that wasn't there yesterday." The tracks led toward the trees and disappeared. I looked around carefully, every sound amplified in the quiet air, the crunch of leaves, the soft creak of the weather vane turning. No movement, no birds, only that heavy, expectant silence that feels like someone holding their breath. We reached the barn door. The lock was newer than I remembered, gleaming metal with clean edges. I used the silver key. It turned smoothly with a soft click. The sound echoed through the empty valley, and I felt Lily's hand tighten around mine. Inside, the barn smelled of dust, oil, and hay. Light streamed through the gaps in the boards, painting thin golden stripes across the floor. Michael's tools hung neatly on the walls, each labeled in his tidy handwriting. He had always been organized, methodical, his mind a constant map of patterns and plans. In the corner stood a stack of crates labeled SB Project in black marker. I lifted one lid. Inside were folders, cables, and what looked like hard drives wrapped in cloth. Picked one up. It was heavier than I expected, and the label read, Escrow timestamp verified. "Grandma," Lily whispered, "someone's been here." I turned. She pointed at the floor. Footprints, muddy, fresh, led from the side door to where we stood. They weren't ours. A shiver ran through me. I moved toward the side door, pushed it open, and stepped outside. The ground was soft from last night's dew. The footprints led toward the tree line and vanished. But then, just beyond the fence, something caught my eye. A glint of metal. I lifted my phone and zoomed in with the camera. A black SUV, half hidden behind the trees, engine off, but still warm enough to send faint steam into the air. "Back inside," I whispered. We locked the barn door and hurried to the house. My pulse pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Once inside, I checked the windows. The road was empty again. No sound, no movement. "Grandma," Lily said, her voice trembling slightly. "They were watching, weren't they?" I forced a calm I didn't feel. "Yes, but now we know we're right where we're supposed to be." We sat in the living room until dusk, the light fading slowly from the sky. Lily rested her head on my shoulder, and I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Your father was brave," I said softly. "He didn't back down when truth got dangerous. And now it's our turn." When she fell asleep, I covered her with the old quilt Henry used to keep in the truck. I stood by the window, watching the horizon turn from gold to gray. Somewhere beyond those trees, someone was waiting. But so was the truth, and I was done being afraid of it. I looked at the barn one more time before closing the curtain. Its silhouette stood dark against the fading light, solid and patient, as if holding the answers we hadn't yet earned. Tomorrow, I would go back there. But tonight, I let the sound of my granddaughter's slow breathing remind me why I was still fighting. For Michael, for Lily, for what family is supposed to mean. The next morning began deceptively calm. The sky was a flat stretch of blue, and sunlight spilled gently through the kitchen window. Lily sat at the table, eating toast and sketching in the corner of Michael's notebook. For a few quiet minutes, I allowed myself to believe the world had paused for us, to breathe, to think, to gather strength. Then the sound came. Tires on gravel. I walked to the front window, my coffee halfway to my lips. A line of vehicles moved slowly up the drive, 3 black SUVs followed by a silver sedan. The first car stopped near the gate, dust billowing behind it like smoke. I felt my stomach twist. "Lily," I said, my voice low, "go to the back room, now." She looked at me wide-eyed. "Is it them?" "Yes, sweetheart. Lock the door and stay quiet." She obeyed without another word. I stood still as the cars came to a stop in front of the porch. When the doors opened, I recognized them instantly. Preston Hale stepped out first, his tailored coat gleaming in the winter light. Marjorie followed, her sunglasses hiding everything but her disdain. Behind them was Victor Lang, the family's lawyer, clutching a slim leather briefcase. I met them on the porch, the cold air biting at my face. Preston smiled like we were neighbors meeting for tea. "Fran," he said smoothly, "what a surprise to see you here. Elise didn't mention you'd be staying at the property." I crossed my arms. "That's because she didn't know. I only came to pick up some things that belonged to my son." "Your son's estate," Victor interrupted. Now belongs to Mrs. Elise Danner. As you're aware, under the will, this property is under her control, and by extension, her trustees. Trustees? I repeated. Preston stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. Investors, Fran. Silverbrook isn't just a ranch anymore. We've turned it into something that can actually generate income. You should be proud. Proud of what? I said sharply. Taking what wasn't yours? Marjorie's smile didn't move past her lips. It's called progress, dear. Michael knew how to build something worth protecting. We're just continuing his work. I stared at her, at the way she said continuing as if erasing the man who'd built it first. My hand tightened around the porch railing. Then why are you here? Victor set his briefcase down and opened it with a click. Mrs. Danner, this is a simple notice. The Hale Energy Development Fund, acting as managing shareholder, is exercising its right to enter and evaluate assets related to the Silverbrook property. That includes the house and all outbuildings. He handed me a folder filled with stamped papers. Will only be a few hours. I glanced down at the papers, the signatures printed neatly in black ink. I didn't need to read them to know they were a threat. You think you can just walk in here? Walk in? Preston chuckled softly. It's business. Elise will sign off on everything once she understands what's at stake. We're simply protecting our investment. Behind them, I noticed two men in dark coats unloading equipment from the SUVs. Cameras, boxes, something that looked like measuring devices. They were already heading toward the barn. My voice came out steadier than I expected. You're not stepping inside that barn without a warrant. Preston's smile faded. Come now, Fran. No need to make this difficult. I'm not making anything difficult, I said. You are. For a moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was the crunch of boots on gravel. Then Victor sighed, pretending patience. Fine, but you should know, the media will hear about this. Refusing a lawful inspection could look suspicious. He said the last word slowly, as if tasting it. Marjorie turned toward him. Victor, darling, maybe we should call the station now. It'll save us the trouble later. That was their plan. Paint me as the problem, the hysterical mother guarding secrets. They didn't know what I'd already found, what Michael had left behind, what was waiting in that notebook on the kitchen table. Before I could answer, the door creaked behind me. Lily stood there, pale but defiant. Leave us alone, she said. Preston's eyes narrowed. Lily, you shouldn't be here. This is adult business. She stepped closer to me. It's my dad's farm. You don't get to take it. His voice softened, but it was the kind of softness that hides a knife. Your father made certain decisions, dear. We're just ensuring his legacy continues. Legacy? I said. He tried to stop you, and you know it. The words hung in the air like frost. Victor closed his briefcase and nodded to the men by the SUVs. We'll return with authorization. You can't keep us out forever. Preston adjusted his scarf and looked at me one last time. You're fighting the wrong battle, Fran. Family should stand together. Think about Elise before you make this worse for her. They turned and walked away, their convoy leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. I watched until the last car disappeared past the gate. Only when the sound of engines faded completely did I realize how hard my heart was beating. Lily came to stand beside me. Grandma, she whispered. They're not going to stop, are they? No, I said quietly. They won't. But neither will we. We went back inside, closing the door against the cold. I picked up the folder Victor had left and flipped through it. Near the bottom was a company name I'd never seen before, Hale Energy Holdings, subsection SB. It listed a date 6 months before Michael's death. He'd known they already owned part of Silverbrook, and he'd been fighting them from within. I felt the truth settle into place like a key turning in a lock. Everything about that day, the letter, the poisoning, the cameras, the fear, was tied to this. The quiet in the house deepened, heavy but clear. I looked at my granddaughter, her face full of questions I wasn't ready to answer, and said, "Your father left us everything we need. We just have to find it." She nodded slowly. "Then where do we start?" I looked toward the barn, its doors gleaming faintly in the afternoon sun. "We start where he told us to." The air grew colder that evening, sharp enough to sting when I breathed. The Hales were gone, at least for now, but their presence lingered like smoke after a fire. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in an old quilt that smelled faintly of cedar. I stood by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the hills. The world was quiet again, too quiet, and I had learned by now that silence never meant safety. A movement by the fence caught my eye. A man's shadow, tall and deliberate, walking slowly toward the gate. My first thought was that the Hales had sent someone back. I reached for the poker by the fireplace, my pulse quickening, but as the figure stepped into the porch light, I froze. He wore a brown work jacket and a weathered hat pulled low over his brow. I knew that silhouette. I opened the door cautiously. "Elliot Shaw," I said, my voice half disbelief, half relief. He tipped his hat. "Evening, Mrs. Danner. I was hoping you'd still be here." Elliot had been Michael's ranch manager years ago. Loyal, steady, the kind of man who spoke only when he had something worth saying. The last time I'd seen him was at Henry's funeral. He looked older now, the lines on his face deeper, but his eyes carried the same quiet honesty. I stepped aside to let him in. "How did you know I was here?" He wiped his boots on the mat before answering. "Your son told me to keep watch. Said if anything ever happened to him, I'd know when to come back." I studied him, uncertain whether to believe what I was hearing. "Michael said that?" He nodded. "He saved my life once, helped me when I was at my lowest. I owed him more than I could ever repay. That's why I kept his instructions, even when they stopped making sense." He pulled a small drive from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. "He told me to bring this to you when the time came. I reckon that time's now." The object was small, cold, and red, the same kind of flash drive I'd found in the vent upstairs. My throat tightened. "Did he tell you what's on it?" "Not exactly," Elliot said. "But he called it his insurance. Told me it'd make the truth impossible to bury." I gestured toward the laptop. "Let's see it." He nodded and plugged it in. The screen lit up instantly, displaying a folder labeled Escrow Archive. Inside were dozens of video files, all bearing timestamps and digital seals. Each file had a verification tag, SHA 256. Verified. Elliot pointed to the dates. He uploaded every piece of evidence through an escrow timestamp system. Means it's locked in a legal chain that can't be altered. Whatever he found, he made sure it would hold up in court. I clicked the first file. The video showed Michael in a recording studio, reading aloud from documents I recognized from his notebook. "Silverbrook was never meant to be part of the Hale project," he said. "But once they found the mineral survey, everything changed. They hid the oil data, falsified environmental reports, and planned to use our land to cover extraction." The screen flickered. Another file opened automatically, this one showing graphs, contracts, emails. The Hale Energy logo appeared repeatedly, its watermark glowing in the corner. Elliot exhaled slowly. He got everything. Time-stamped, notarized, cross-linked through escrow. That's what he called his war room. Said the only person he trusted to finish it was you. The room felt smaller as his words settled in. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the glowing screen. He thought they'd come after him. They already did, Elliot said quietly. I warned him once that some of Hale's men were asking questions about the wells. He told me not to worry, said he had backups hidden in 3 places, one here, one in town, and one somewhere safe. I swallowed hard. Do you know where the last one is? He hesitated. I think I might, but getting there won't be simple. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the shutters. I felt it, the shift in the air that always came before a storm. Elliot leaned forward, lowering his voice. I saw their SUVs on my way up the ridge. They're not done with this. Preston doesn't just want the oil. He wants to wipe every trace of Michael's work. He looked toward the hallway where Lily slept. You should keep her close, and keep the evidence closer. I nodded. I'm not letting them take this from him. He gave a faint smile. That's what your boy said too. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The laptop hummed softly, its light flickering across the walls. Finally, I asked, Elliot, why now? Why come back after all this time? He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred. Because I saw the obituary, and I knew something was wrong. Michael was a fighter. He wouldn't just stop living. I thought of the letter, of the voice in the video, of the words. Someone wants me gone sooner. Do you think he knew they'd kill him? I asked quietly. Elliot didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was soft but certain. I think he planned for it. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. I didn't know whether to cry or scream, so I did neither. I simply reached for the flash drive and slipped it into my pocket. It felt like holding a piece of his heartbeat. Before he left, Elliot walked to the window and scanned the yard. I'll keep a watch tonight, he said. If anything happens, use the old intercom by the barn. It still works. Be careful, I told him. He tipped his hat. Always am, ma'am. When he disappeared into the dusk, I closed the door and leaned against it. My pulse steady but heavy. Through the thin curtain, I could see the outline of the barn glowing faintly under the moonlight. Somewhere in there, my son's truth waited. Locked away, time-stamped and sealed. Daring the world to deny it. And now, with Elliot's help, I had the means to open it. By dawn, the fog had lifted, revealing the fields of Silver Brook stretched out like a pale green ocean beneath the rising sun. I hadn't slept, but exhaustion had given way to something sharper, clarity. The drive Elliot brought was only one part of Michael's puzzle. The rest, I knew, was buried somewhere on this land. The letter, the videos, the key, they all pointed to one place. The barn. Lily stirred on the couch as I buttoned my coat. Grandma, where are you going? To the barn, I said softly. I think your father left us something there. She sat up, her hair messy, her eyes still half dreaming. I'm coming with you. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep her safe inside, but another part, the one that remembered how strong she'd already been, knew I couldn't keep her from this. All right, I said, but stay close. We stepped outside. The air was cool and wet, and the grass glittered with dew. Elliot was already there, standing by the barn door, his hat pulled low. He greeted us with a nod. Morning, Mrs. Danner. Miss Lily. He gestured toward the padlock. I checked earlier. The side latch was tampered with last night. Someone's been trying to get in. Then let's make sure we find what they were looking for first, I said, and slipped the silver key into the lock. It turned easily, clicking open like it had been waiting for me. Inside, the barn was dim, dust floating in shafts of sunlight that streamed through the wooden slats. The smell of earth and machine oil filled the air. Michael's workbench sat against the far wall, covered in blueprints, soil maps, and labeled jars of water samples. It looked like he had left in the middle of something, as if expecting to come right back. Elliot switched on his flashlight, the beam cutting across the floor. He said there was a basement, he murmured. A hidden room beneath the workshop. Never told me how to open it. I scanned the space, remembering how Henry used to hide his whiskey bottles under loose boards near the tractor. Michael must have learned from him. I knelt by the floor near the workbench, running my hand over the wood until I felt it. A subtle dip, almost invisible. I pressed down. A hollow echo answered. "Here," I said. Elliot crouched beside me and found a small metal hook buried in the dust. He pulled it up, and a section of the floor lifted with a groan. Beneath it was a staircase descending into darkness. The air that rose from below was cold, metallic, and still. We exchanged a look, then descended, the boards creaking softly beneath our feet. Lily followed, her flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. At the bottom was a small concrete room lined with shelves and metal filing cabinets. In the center stood a table covered in equipment, monitors, a generator, and a stack of binders labeled with months and years. On the wall, a corkboard was covered in maps, printed emails, and lab reports. Michael's handwriting filled the margins. Lily whispered, "Dad built all this?" "Yes," I said quietly. "This was his war room." Elliot pointed to the corkboard. "Look here. Geology reports, test wells. See this?" He tapped one of the maps, where red lines cut across the valley. "Oil reserves. Deep ones. Hale Energy must have known years ago." I opened one of the binders. Inside were lab results from 3 different testing facilities. Each page carried the same finding: contamination from petroleum byproducts in the local water supply. The final page bore Michael's note. Toxicology confirmed. Levels consistent with chronic exposure. Cause, unreported drilling activity. Lily's voice trembled. "You mean he was poisoned because of them?" Elliot's jaw tightened. "Wouldn't be the first time a whistleblower got sick." I closed the binder and took a deep breath. He knew, and he tried to stop them. Elliot powered on the generator in the corner. The monitors flickered to life, displaying rows of data. One screen showed a login window labeled Hale Energy Internal Network. "He hacked their system," Elliot said. "Copied internal emails. That's how he traced the drilling contracts back to Preston's fund." I scrolled through the files. There they were. Correspondence between Preston and his legal team discussing subsurface extraction rights and media containment strategies. One email chilled me. "Ensure Danner's medical review remains confidential. Victor will handle the hospital liaison." It felt like the room itself tilted. My knees went weak. They tampered with his medical records. Elliot nodded grimly. Dr. Cordell probably never saw the final report. They must have buried it. I reached for the flash drive he'd given me the night before and plugged it into the console. It matched perfectly with the data here. Each timestamp, each signature verified by the escrow chain. Michael had built an entire archive of proof that couldn't be erased. The printer in the corner whirred to life, spitting out a page with a summary of the verified files. I picked it up. Across the top was a heading: Chain of Custody, Silver Brook Case. "This is enough to take to court," I whispered. Elliot looked at me. "It's also enough to make them desperate." He was right. Outside, the faint rumble of engines echoed through the valley. Lily flinched. "They're coming back, Grandma." I switched off the lights, leaving only the glow from the monitor. "Take what we can," I said. "The drives, the binder, the printouts. Leave the rest running." We climbed the stairs quietly, our footsteps muffled by the dirt. As I reached the barn door, I turned one last time and looked down at the glowing screen below. For a moment, I could almost see Michael standing there, head bent over the desk, his hand scribbling notes. "Mom," I heard his voice echo in memory. "Trust the system. Truth leaves a trail." I whispered back into the dark. "It does, son, and I'll make sure they follow it." We slipped out into the daylight just as the first SUV appeared beyond the gate. Elliot motioned toward the trees. "This way. There's another path behind the creek." I took Lily's hand, clutching the binder to my chest, and followed him through the tall grass. Behind us, the engines grew louder, closer. The truth was no longer buried, but neither were the people who wanted it silenced. 3 days later, I stood outside the courthouse in Burlington, the wind biting through my coat. I had never imagined I'd be here, dragged into a battle my son had started and paid for with his life. But there I was, binder in hand, a drive full of evidence in my purse, and the weight of Michael's voice echoing in my head. Truth leaves a trail. Thomas Reed met me at the steps. He looked composed as always, his gray suit immaculate, his eyes sharp behind wire-frame glasses. "You're right on time, Mrs. Danner," he said. "Discovery hearings in 20 minutes. You sure you're ready for this?" I nodded. As ready as a mother can be when she's fighting for her son's name. He smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure we do him justice." Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the wind outside. The walls were paneled in dark wood, and every sound, the shuffle of papers, the click of pens, seemed to echo like thunder. Across the aisle sat the Hales, flanked by their lawyer, Victor Lang. Preston was calm, his posture straight, his hands folded neatly on the table. Marjorie leaned toward him, whispering something that made him smirk. Elise sat between them, pale, her eyes darting everywhere but toward me. When the judge entered, everyone stood. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Thomas began the opening remarks. "Your Honor, this hearing concerns the immediate preservation of assets and digital evidence related to the estate of the late Michael Danner. We request a temporary restraining order to prevent the transfer of Silverbrook Ranch and to compel discovery of materials in possession of Hale Energy Holdings." Victor rose smoothly. "Your Honor, this is a baseless attempt to disrupt lawful ownership. The petitioner," he gestured toward me, "has no standing. Mrs. Danner was explicitly excluded from her son's will." Thomas didn't flinch. And yet, her son's own encrypted records suggest foul play, including doctored medical reports, falsified drilling permits, and suppression of toxicology results tied to his death. He placed the binder on the table and slid a printed page forward. "We have verified timestamps, escrow certifications, and lab confirmations from 3 independent facilities, all digitally notarized." Victor tilted his head, feigning amusement. "Digital records can be fabricated, Your Honor. Anyone with moderate skill can create an illusion of legitimacy." Thomas smiled thinly. "Perhaps, but illusions don't carry blockchain notarization." He clicked his laptop, and the courtroom monitors flickered to life. The screen displayed Michael's files, each one bearing the same certification seal and timestamp chain. The audience murmured softly. Victor stood again, his voice rising. This proves nothing except that the deceased was meticulous. We question the authenticity of these records and, frankly, the mental state of the individual who created them. My chest tightened, but Thomas didn't miss a beat. Then let's test that claim. We've submitted copies of these records to an independent escrow verifier, and their hash values match exactly. Every byte. Victor's jaw tightened. Your Honor, this is a distraction. The real issue is property rights, not conspiracy theories. The judge looked between them. Mr. Reed, do you have any corroborating physical evidence? Thomas nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Toxicology results from 3 labs, signed by Dr. Nancy Cordell, Michael Danner's attending physician. That name hit the room like a spark. Marjorie stiffened. Preston's confident smile faltered. Victor rose again, his tone suddenly harder. Those tests were never confirmed. The hospital records show no such results. Thomas's eyes gleamed. Exactly, they were deleted, but Dr. Cordell provided notarized backups under her own file chain. We'll be calling her as a witness. The judge nodded slowly. Proceed. The tension in the room thickened. Thomas continued, laying out the documents one by one. Each paper bore the blue seal of escrow verification. He spoke calmly, his words crisp and deliberate. When it was Victor's turn again, he adjusted his tie and forced a smile. Your Honor, this is an elaborate fabrication. The Hales have done nothing unlawful. These documents are doctored, these videos staged. In fact, we have reason to believe the petitioner herself may have manipulated this material. He pressed a button on his laptop, and suddenly a new video appeared on the monitor. My stomach dropped. It was Michael, but distorted, flickering, his voice warped. In the video he said, "They're watching me. If I can't stop them, maybe I should join them." Gasps filled the courtroom. My hand flew to my mouth. "That's not real," I whispered. Victor spread his arms. Your Honor, this is what we mean. The line between truth and fiction is easily blurred. We request the court dismiss this circus until legitimate verification is presented. Thomas leaned toward the judge. That video is a deepfake. We anticipated this tactic. He opened another folder, pulling up metadata reports from Grace Porter, the investigative journalist. These forensics confirmed the fake's creation date, 4 days after Michael's death, originating from a Hale Energy device ID, the same IP tied to their corporate network. The judge's gavel struck once. Enough. Both parties will refrain from further outbursts. Thomas exhaled slowly, then spoke with quiet precision. Your Honor, all we ask today is preservation of evidence. A temporary restraining order against any transfer or sale of Silverbrook Ranch until discovery is complete. The judge leaned back, studying both tables. After a long silence, he said, The request for TRO is granted. Discovery will proceed under court supervision. No assets may be moved or altered until review. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Across the room, Victor's face darkened. Preston whispered something harsh to him. Marjorie crossed her arms tightly. Elise, for the first time, looked directly at me. Her eyes shimmered, not with defiance, but with something else. Guilt. As the judge left the bench, Thomas turned to me. That was a small win, but an important one. We just bought time. I nodded, my throat tight. It's enough for now. Outside, the reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing. I said nothing. The cold air felt cleaner somehow, sharper. Lily was waiting by the car, her face full of questions. I smiled faintly and reached for her hand. What happened, Grandma? Justice blinked, I said. Just for a second. But it saw us. We drove away as the courthouse faded behind us. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. The following evening, Silverbrook was wrapped in an amber hush. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth after a brief rain, and the clouds hung low over the valley like a secret no one dared to tell. I sat at the kitchen table with the binder of court documents spread out before me, rereading every line as if meaning might shift under a different light. The TRO had bought us time, but time alone couldn't protect the truth. Somewhere out there, Preston Hale was regrouping, and I could feel it, the quiet before another storm. The knock came just after dusk. 3 slow, familiar taps. For a moment, my heart leapt. Elliot, maybe, or Thomas with new updates. But when I opened the door, the breath caught in my throat. Helena. My sister stood there in a raincoat, her hair damp, her smile practiced. Fran, she said softly, her voice a careful mix of concern and surprise. You look tired. I am, I replied. It's been a long few days. She stepped inside before I could invite her, glancing around the house as if she were taking inventory. It hasn't changed much, she said. Michael loved this place, didn't he? I nodded, closing the door behind her. He did. She walked toward the table, her gaze falling on the open binder. Is that about the hearing? I saw something on the news. You really took the Hales to court? I watched her carefully. Yes, and we won the first round. Her eyebrows rose. Impressive. But you should be careful, Fran. Those people don't lose gracefully. The way she said those people made me wonder which side she was really on. I poured 2 cups of tea and set one in front of her. You didn't drive all the way here just to warn me, did you? She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the window. No, I wanted to see you. After everything that's happened with Michael, I thought maybe we shouldn't be strangers anymore. I wanted to believe her, but something in her voice, too smooth, too timed, didn't sit right. We sat in silence for a moment, the ticking of the clock filling the space between us. Finally, she sighed. I know you think poorly of me. Maybe I deserve that. But things haven't been easy for me either. You know about the medical bills, the debt, Preston. He offered help when no one else did. There it was, the missing piece I had suspected. And what did he ask for in return? She stared into her tea, her reflection rippling in the surface. Just information. He said it was nothing harmful. Just a few copies of records, some notes. I didn't think it mattered. You gave him access to Michael's documents, I said quietly. Her silence was answer enough. I stood, trying to keep my voice steady. Helena, you leaked his files, the ones that proved what they were doing. You put all of this at risk. She looked up sharply, eyes glistening. I didn't know, Fran. I swear. I didn't know they'd use it against you. Preston said he wanted to protect Elise, to stop a scandal before it ruined her. Protect her? I said. They poisoned her husband. They destroyed my son's name. Tears welled in her eyes, but I'd learned long ago that guilt and regret aren't the same thing. I was desperate, she whispered. I thought if I helped him once, it'd be over. Before I could answer, a faint vibration buzzed against the table. Helena's phone. The screen lit up. I saw the name before she did. Preston Hale. I reached for it. She grabbed it first, her movements clumsy. It's nothing, she said quickly. Then show me, I said. She hesitated. The phone buzzed again. A preview message flashed on the screen before she could turn it over. "Did you get the files yet? We need them before the injunction." For a second, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the wind pressing against the house. "Helena," I said slowly, "what did you promise him?" Her voice cracked. "I didn't want to lose everything. He said, if I could just get a copy of the escrow files, he'd clear my debt. You don't understand what it's like, Fran. I was drowning." I felt the ache of old love twist into something harder. "You chose money over blood." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I chose survival." I turned away, my hands trembling as I leaned against the counter. "Michael trusted you once. He used to call you his second mom." "I never wanted to hurt him," she said. "I just thought—" Her sentence broke when the sound of a car engine echoed from outside. Headlights cut through the curtains. I looked at her sharply. "Who knows you're here?" She swallowed hard. I don't know. Preston said he'd send someone to check in." I ran to the window. A dark SUV idled near the gate, its headlights off now, a silhouette in the night. I turned back to her. "You led them here." She shook her head, panicked. "No, I didn't mean to. I didn't—" A sharp knock thundered at the door, cutting her words in half. Elliot's voice came from the porch. "Mrs. Danner, it's me." I exhaled in relief and opened the door quickly. He stepped inside, his hat dripping rain. His expression turned grim when he saw Helena. "She's been sending them updates," he said. "I intercepted a call near the creek. They were triangulating the house." Helena's voice broke. "I'm sorry, Fran. I just wanted out." Elliot pulled a small recording device from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. "Not anymore. I've got her call logged, every word. That's all the proof you'll need." Helena's shoulders crumpled. "Please, Fran, tell them I didn't mean for it to go this far." I looked at her, at the sister who once held my hand through Henry's funeral, who had sat beside me when Michael was born. I felt both fury and pity in equal measure. "You already did," I said quietly. "But this time, it's going to end with the truth." Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping gently on the windows like a clock counting down. Elliot turned to me. "We should move everything tonight. If the Hales know about the evidence, they'll come for it before sunrise." I nodded. "Then let's not give them the chance." Helena stayed behind at the table, staring into her untouched tea as we gathered the binders and drives. For the first time, she didn't have anything left to say. As we stepped out into the storm, I looked back at her through the open door. For a brief moment, I saw the sister I used to know, the one who braided my hair before school, the one who always said family was everything. I whispered, "It still could have been." Then I closed the door. By the time the rain stopped, dawn was still hours away. The fields of Silverbrook shimmered faintly under a pale moon, every blade of grass heavy with dew. Elliot and I had moved most of Michael's files into a locked cabinet in the basement. We worked in silence, careful not to wake Lily, who was asleep in the loft upstairs. I could feel exhaustion creeping into my bones, but I also felt something stronger, a fierce clarity. The betrayal was exposed, but the proof had to be undeniable. Helena's confession wasn't enough. We needed to catch the Hales in the act. Elliot rubbed the back of his neck. "They'll come for what's left, you know. Hale doesn't like leaving loose ends." "I'm counting on that," I said. He looked at me. "What do you mean?" I opened Michael's drawer and pulled out a small leather notebook, the one I'd found in the hidden room. Inside were pages of scribbled notes and sketches, but one stood out, a drawing of a barn floor with the word decoy written beside it. "Michael always planned ahead," I said. He knew they'd come looking. We'll give them something to find. We spent the next hour building the trap. Elliot made a digital copy of one of the drives, stripped of anything that could truly incriminate the Hales, but dressed with enough half-truths to tempt them. I placed the flash drive inside a notebook that looked identical to Michael's real one, sealing it with the same worn leather strap. Then we left it on the workbench in the barn, beside a mug of cold coffee and a stack of blank invoices, like Michael had just stepped away. Once they take it, I said, we'll have them on camera. Elliot nodded. Already set. The security system's back online. Motion sensors, time-stamped footage, everything feeding to the off-site drive. I looked at him and smiled faintly. You're a good man, Elliot. He tipped his hat. Just keeping my promise. The house was still when we returned inside, except for the faint sound of Lily's soft breathing upstairs. I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat at the table, exhaustion pulling at me. Elliot left just before dawn to check the perimeter. For a moment, I let myself believe the storm had passed, but peace never lasted long in this place. When I woke later that morning, the house was too quiet. I called for Lily, and she appeared at the top of the stairs, her hair tousled, holding something in her hands. Grandma, she said softly, you should see this. It was Michael's real notebook. My heart jumped. Where did you find that? In the attic, she said. Behind the old chest. It looked like it had been hidden on purpose. I took it from her, my hands trembling as I opened the first page. Michael's handwriting filled the paper in hurried lines. Most of it was data and notes, but toward the end, the words changed. If they find me before this is over, tell Mom I forgave her long ago. I read it twice before the meaning truly sank in. All the anger he'd carried, all the distance he'd put between us. It hadn't been bitterness. It had been protection. Lily touched my arm gently. He wasn't angry at you, Grandma. My eyes burned. No, I whispered. He wasn't. Before I could say anything else, Elliot came running through the front door. They took the bait, he said breathlessly. 2 of Hale's men, caught on camera at 3:17 this morning. One of them was Helena. The room seemed to tilt. Helena? He nodded grimly. She must have come back after we left the barn. The footage shows her opening the drawer and sending photos of the notebook to someone before driving off. I've got it all saved. I closed my eyes. The ache that had begun the night before turned into something colder. Then it's done, I said quietly. They exposed themselves. Lily stepped closer. What will happen to Aunt Helena? I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The truth has its own kind of mercy. It doesn't always save you, but it never lets you hide for long. Elliot placed the printed stills from the security footage on the table. Each frame was marked with a timestamp and Helena's face illuminated by the barn light. In her hand was the fake notebook. She delivered it straight to Preston, Elliot said. We'll have a record of every message she sent. I stared at the images, my heart heavy. She thought she was saving herself, I said softly. She just signed her name to their crimes. The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. Thomas called to say the court had approved the next motion. The TRO was holding. Discovery was expanding. For the first time, the law was moving faster than the lies. As evening fell, Lily and I sat together on the porch, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked soil. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Do you think Dad knew it would come to this? She asked. I looked out at the barn, glowing faintly under the setting sun. He didn't just know, I said. He planned for it. Every piece, every file. He left a path so we could find our way back. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled faintly. He left us each other too. I reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. That's the one thing they can't take. The horizon darkened, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. A low, steady promise. Inside, Michael's notebook lay open on the table, the page with his last words fluttering in the breeze from the open window. For the first time since his death, the farm didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive, waiting. The storm arrived just before midnight, sweeping down the valley in sheets of rain that blurred the windows and made the trees groan under its weight. The sound was relentless, a rhythm of water and wind that filled every corner of Silverbrook. I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, the binder and Michael's notebook spread before me. Each page, each photograph, each timestamp felt like part of a living pulse, beating toward something larger. Lily was upstairs, reading, her lamp flickering with the power surges. Elliot had gone into town to deliver a duplicate of the drive to Thomas, just in case. He promised he'd return by dawn, but I could already feel unease threading through the storm. The Hales were losing control of their story, and people like them didn't lose quietly. At 1:04 a.m., my phone buzzed on the table. It was Grace Porter, the journalist Thomas had brought into the case. Her message read, "Call me. Urgent." I dialed her immediately. The signal cracked with static. "Grace?" "Fran, listen carefully," she said. Her voice was brisk but calm. "They've launched a smear campaign. Preston's team is leaking deepfakes of Michael, videos showing him fabricating evidence, splicing his voice into statements he never made. They're trying to discredit the entire archive before the court can verify it." My heart clenched. Can they make people believe that? "They already are," she said grimly. "The videos went live 2 hours ago. Local news, social media, paid outlets. It's everywhere. I've been analyzing the metadata. The creation timestamps don't match the upload times. The signatures point to Hale Energy servers, but they've masked the IP through offshore proxies." "Can you prove it's fake?" "I'm close," she said. "The files are layered with inconsistencies, compression artifacts, mismatched hash chains. If I can trace the metadata back to the original device, it's over for them, but I'll need access to your escrow backups. Can you send me one of the verified hash reports?" "I'll send it now." I moved to the laptop and uploaded the document Michael had labeled Integrity Ledger. Grace exhaled. "Got it. Good. This ledger includes original blockchain signatures. They can't fake those. Once I overlay it with the forged files, the discrepancy will be undeniable." "How long will it take?" "A few hours," she said. "By morning, the court will have evidence that Hale fabricated evidence of their own." When I hung up, relief flickered through me, but it was brief. Lightning flashed, followed by a low crack of thunder that rattled the windows. I rose to close them but stopped when I noticed headlights through the rain. A car was pulling up the drive. I froze. Elliot wasn't due back until sunrise. I turned off the lamp and peered through the curtain. The car door opened. A figure stepped out, umbrella tilted against the downpour. The porch light revealed her face. "Elise," I whispered. She stood there drenched, her coat clinging to her frame, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" "I had nowhere else to go," she said, her voice trembling. "They're turning on me, Fran. My parents, Victor, everyone." I led her inside, closing the door behind her. Her hands were shaking as she handed me a folded sheet of paper. "They made me sign this," she said. "A statement claiming Michael's recordings were staged. They said if I didn't, they'd ruin me, take Lily away, Destroy everything. I unfolded the document. It was a formal affidavit, typed and notarized, declaring that Michael's digital records were fabricated under his mother's direction. My stomach turned. You didn't sign this, did you? Tears streamed down her cheeks. I did, but I never sent it. I couldn't. I drove here instead. Lightning flashed again, casting the room in white light for an instant. You can make this right, I said. You can tell the truth. She nodded, her voice breaking. I will, but you have to protect Lily. They know she's here. Before I could respond, the phone buzzed again. Grace's name flashed on the screen. I answered quickly. Grace? Her voice was electric with urgency. Fran, it worked. The metadata proves everything. The deepfakes were generated using a proprietary signature from Hale Energy's internal system. I have screenshots, server IDs, and chain logs. I'm sending them to Thomas now. We'll file an emergency motion for expanded discovery before dawn. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. You're sure? Absolutely. Once the court sees this, their entire case collapses. I thanked her and hung up. Elise sank into a chair, her head in her hands. Is it over? She whispered. Not yet, I said. But it's turning. We sat in silence, listening to the storm pound against the walls. Then, faintly, over the rain, came another sound, a sharp metallic ping from the old intercom near the kitchen. Elliot's voice crackled through it. They're on their way. The Hales just left town in a convoy, 3 cars, headed your direction. My pulse surged. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. Thomas's team is alerting the sheriff, but you need to get those drives secure now. I turned to Elise. We'll move everything to the cellar. Now. We hurried through the house, gathering every drive and binder, placing them into waterproof cases Michael had labeled for escrow. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory born of fear. Outside, thunder rolled closer, louder. When we were done, I locked the cellar door and slipped the key into my pocket. Elise looked pale, shaking. Fran, I can't undo what I've done, she said. But I can tell the truth in court. You will, I said softly. And when you do, the rest will follow. She nodded, tears mingling with rain on her cheeks. The intercom crackled again. Elliot's voice came through, urgent but steady. Sheriff's deputies are blocking the main road. They'll hold them off. Grace just confirmed. Thomas filed the motion. Discoveries expanding to every Hale Energy device. The words sank in like sunlight through the clouds. For the first time in months, the balance shifted. The lies had reached their breaking point. When the first light of morning broke through the storm, it came like a quiet exhale. The rain slowed. The thunder drifted away, and in its place was something cleaner, calm but powerful. Grace called once more at dawn. Her voice was tired but triumphant. It's done, Fran. The metadata's verified. The court accepted the submission. Discovery will open today. Then it's real, I said. The truth's out. It's only the beginning, she said. But yes, it's real. When I hung up, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and washed clean, the valley stretching before me in soft light. I could almost hear Michael in the wind, that quiet steadiness in his tone. You'll understand soon. And I did. The lies were breaking apart, scattered by the same storm they'd tried to summon. Inside, Lily came running down the stairs, her face bright despite the sleepless night. Grandma, look. She held her phone, a message from Thomas on the screen. It read, Discovery approved. Hale Energy under investigation. I smiled through the tears that finally came. Your father's truth just found daylight. The courthouse in Burlington was quieter this time, but the silence felt heavy, like the air before a verdict. Every step I took down the marble corridor echoed with the weight of months, of secrets unearthed, betrayals faced, and a son's truth finally clawing its way toward the light. The sunlight through the tall windows fell across the floor in perfect squares. As if even the building itself demanded order, Thomas walked beside me, steady as ever. He carried only a thin folder now, confident in the mountain of proof already filed. "Today's not about evidence," he said softly. "It's about courage." "I've been running on that for too long," I answered. He smiled faintly. "Then let's finish it." Inside the courtroom, the tension hummed like an invisible wire. Preston and Marjorie Hale sat at the defense table, their composure beginning to crack under the strain of weeks of revelations. Victor Lang stood beside them, his tie immaculate but his eyes shadowed, and at the far end of their table sat Elise. She looked smaller than I remembered, her posture straight, but her hands trembling on the edge of her chair. When the judge entered, we rose. The proceedings began without ceremony. Thomas started with a calm precision that filled the room. "Your Honor, since our last session, Discovery has uncovered conclusive evidence linking Hale Energy Holdings to forged materials, falsified lab results, and digital fabrication designed to discredit the late Michael Danner. We also present new testimony that will make clear who was truly responsible for the cover-up." He gestured toward Elise. Victor stiffened. "Objection, Your Honor. My client is not—" The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. Proceed, Mr. Reed." Elise stood slowly. She looked pale, exhausted, but there was something resolute in her face, a strength that hadn't been there before. She turned toward me first, her eyes meeting mine for a moment. Then she faced the court. "My husband, Michael Danner, discovered environmental violations tied to my parents' company, Hale Energy. He believed their drilling caused contamination that led to toxic exposure in this community and in his own system." Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "He shared his findings with me. I didn't want to believe him. My parents told me he was paranoid, that his illness was natural, but I saw the reports. I saw the blood work." Preston's voice thundered from the table. "Elise, stop this. You don't know what you're saying." She turned to him, tears brimming but her voice steady. "I know exactly what I'm saying. You told me to keep quiet. You told me that if I protected the company, Lily would have a future. I did what you asked. I stayed silent when Michael got sicker. But silence didn't save anyone." Marjorie's hand shot out to grab her daughter's arm. "You ungrateful!" "Enough," the judge said sharply. Elise freed her arm and faced the bench again. "I can't change what I did, but I can tell the truth now. Michael wasn't paranoid. He was right. My parents' company falsified his toxicology reports. They buried the evidence, and Victor Lang helped them do it." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victor stood, his face flushed. "This is a lie," Thomas interrupted. "Then explain the emails, counselor. The ones sent from your office to the hospital liaison the week of Michael's death. Or the document recovery logs from your firm showing metadata matches to the altered lab files." The judge leaned forward. "Is this true, Mr. Lang?" Victor hesitated for one heartbeat too long. Then his mouth opened, but no sound came. The silence was answer enough. Thomas continued, his tone steady. "Your Honor, these admissions, combined with escrow verification and corroborating lab results, support the reinstatement of Mrs. Danner's rights as temporary executor of her son's estate, pending criminal review of Hale Energy's conduct. The judge sat back, eyes sweeping over the room. After reviewing the submissions and the testimony presented today, this court finds sufficient grounds to issue a protective order. Effective immediately, Francis Danner will assume interim control of Silverbrook Ranch and any related intellectual property until further notice. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. Furthermore, the evidence provided will be referred to the state attorney's office for criminal inquiry. The gavel struck once. The sound reverberated through me like a bell ringing after a long sleep. Preston rose abruptly, fury flashing across his face. "You think this ends here? You can't take my company on the word of a grieving mother and a frightened girl." Thomas turned toward him calmly. "You're right. We didn't take it. You gave it away, with your own signature." He handed a printed email to the clerk. I recognized it, the one we'd found in the hidden room, marked with Preston's digital seal. It was dated 3 months before Michael's death, authorizing drilling without environmental disclosure. The judge nodded. "This hearing is concluded." As the room emptied, Preston's composure shattered into rage, Marjorie's into disbelief, and Victor's into silence. Elise sank into her seat, weeping quietly. I stood there for a long time, unmoving. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release, the kind that comes when something finally stops breaking. Lily ran to me from the gallery, her arms wrapping tight around my waist. "We did it, Grandma." I held her close, my throat too tight to answer. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's not the end, but it's the beginning of justice." Outside, the air smelled clean again. The clouds had lifted, revealing the first stretch of blue sky I'd seen in weeks. Reporters were waiting, their microphones ready, but I walked past them all. I didn't need to speak. The truth already had a voice of its own. Elise followed us out, her face red-eyed but calm. "Fran," she said quietly, "I'll testify in every hearing that follows. I can't undo what I did, but I can help repair it." I looked at her for a long moment. "Then that's where redemption begins," I said. She nodded. As we reached the car, I turned to look back at the courthouse steps. For the first time since Michael's funeral, I felt the weight in my chest loosen. Justice hadn't restored everything we'd lost, but it had restored meaning. And that was enough. The days after the hearing felt quieter than any I could remember. The world, once so loud with tension and deceit, had settled into a soft, exhausted stillness. Silverbrook stood calm again, its hills washed in the gold of late afternoon, the barn doors open, the air carrying the faint scent of rain and soil. For the first time since Michael's death, the farm no longer felt like a place of ghosts. It felt like home. Thomas called early that morning. The state had launched its investigation into Hale Energy. Victor Lang had resigned from his firm. Preston and Marjorie Hale were silent for now, too busy patching holes in their empire to bother with us. Elise had given her full statement, and her voice had turned into something the world finally believed. The truth had made its way into daylight, and like sunlight on old glass, it made every fracture visible. After the call, I spent most of the morning on the porch, sorting through the last of Michael's papers. Lily sat nearby, writing in her notebook. She'd started documenting everything, the letters, the evidence, the way her father had tried to protect what mattered. "Someone has to remember it right," she said when I asked her why. By afternoon, the light softened, stretching long shadows across the fields. I gathered my things and carried them to Michael's old desk, the same spot where I'd first opened his letter. I took a deep breath and began to write. "My dearest Michael, the court heard your voice this week, even though you weren't there to speak. Your truth held steady, just as you'd planned. The farm is safe for now. Lily is safe too. I see you in her more every day. The way she listens before she speaks, the way she notices everything. I'm learning from her, the same way I once tried to teach you. I think you'd laugh at that. I paused, my pen hovering above the page. Outside, the wind stirred the curtains, making them dance softly in the fading light. I used to think I'd failed you, that my silence had cost us everything. But now I understand. You weren't angry when you kept me away. You were protecting me, the way I tried to protect you when you were little. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. The words trembled on the page. I wiped a tear that had fallen before it could blur the ink. I don't need to win anything else now, my son. I just need peace. And wherever you are, I hope you found it too. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the same envelope his lawyer had given me months ago, the one that had changed everything. It still smelled faintly of cedar and dust. I set it on the desk beside his notebook and the silver key, and for a while, I just sat there, listening to the low hum of the wind outside. Then something shifted, a faint rustle behind me. I turned. The window near the desk was open just enough for the breeze to slip through. The curtains fluttered once, then again, harder this time. The old envelope, the one with Michael's handwriting, fell from the shelf above the desk and landed softly on the floor. My pulse quickened. I bent to pick it up. As I did, the paper felt thicker than before. I frowned and ran my thumb along the edge. It wasn't sealed anymore. The corner had come loose. I opened it. Inside, behind the letter I had already read, was another sheet folded neatly, yellowed with age. I unfolded it with shaking hands. The handwriting was Michael's, clear, deliberate, and impossibly alive. Mom, if you're reading this, it means everything went as planned. Don't tell anyone yet. Not even Thomas. I had to disappear until the investigation reached the right hands. The truth needed to be untouchable before I could return. There was a pause in the line, as if he'd hesitated even while writing. I'm safe now. Tell Lily I love her. Tell her I'm proud. And tell her the world is worth fighting for, no matter how dark it gets. M. The paper slipped from my hands. For a moment, the world tilted. My breath caught halfway to a sob, halfway to a prayer. He was alive. Somewhere out there, my son was alive. I pressed the letter to my chest, my body shaking as years of grief turned into something lighter, something that almost felt like joy. The air in the room shifted again. The curtains moved softly, brushing against my arm like a touch. Michael, I whispered. You did it. Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. Grandma, are you okay? I smiled through tears. Yes, sweetheart. I'm more than okay. She stepped closer, and I handed her the letter. Her eyes moved quickly across the words. When she looked up, her lips trembled into a smile that was so much like his it stole my breath. He's really alive? Yes, I said. And when he's ready, he'll come home. She threw her arms around me, and I held her tight, both of us crying and laughing at once. Outside, the wind quieted, leaving only the soft creak of the porch swing and the steady rhythm of our hearts. I looked toward the window. The horizon glowed faintly with the first stars of evening. Somewhere beyond them, I imagined Michael, safe, watching, waiting. I whispered into the stillness. You always said truth leaves a trail. I followed it, son, and it led me back to you. The camera light in the corner blinked once, red, alive. I didn't turn it off. For the first time, at that tongue, I didn't need to hide. The story wasn't over. but it had finally begun to heal.